Shalom, this is Rabbi Nathan Weiner of Congregation Beth Tikvah. Happy Shavuot. Shavuot is Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. And I think about what our Israelite ancestors must have been thinking at that time, having left the oppression of Egypt, going into the Midbar, the wilderness, this great expanse of unknown. And it was there in the unknown that the Israelites merited the greatest revelatory moment of all of Jewish tradition, the receiving of Torah at Mount Sinai. So together our ancestors stood at the base of the mountain and said, Na'aseh v'nishma. They accepted the yoke of the Torah as one community, that all of our Israelite ancestors, all of us today, all Jews who ever will be, the neshamas of all of them were there, witness at Sinai, as one community in the wilderness. Today we find ourselves in a wilderness of a different sense, the wilderness of an unknown. But what we do know is that we are one Jewish community. We've seen mitzvot all around us during this time, people stepping into living their Jewish values in real and meaningful ways, rooted in Torah, rooted in Ahavat Yisrael, a love of the people Israel. So as we stood in community once before, we stand together in community again today. And I thank the Katz Jewish Community Center for bringing this learning, these teachings to our community. Again, we are one community, and the Jewish Community Center is the center of our Jewish community. And we stand together as one in support of the JCC, in support of Torah, in support of Ahavat Yisrael. I wish all of you a Chag Shavuot Sameach, a very happy Shavuot, this Zman Matan Toratenu, the season of the giving of our collective Torah. Take care.
I'm Rabbi Andy Green, president of the Tri-County Board of Jewish Clergy and one of the rabbis at Congregation Bethel in Voorhees. One of my favorite teachings from the Torah is that there are 2 times in the Torah where it says that a person, when they see another's animal fallen under its load by the side of the road, is obligated to help lift that animal. It's kind of the ancient world equivalent of seeing some person in their car broken down at the side of the road and saying, you're obligated to stop and help them. But here's the interesting thing. It's 2 times in the Torah, but they're different. The first time in the book of Exodus, it says, when you see your enemy's ox fallen by the side of the road, you may not ignore it. You have to stop and help lift it up, even though this is your enemy. The second time, it's in the book of Deuteronomy. And it says, when you see your friend's animal fallen under its load by the side of the road, you have to help lift it up. And the beautiful teaching of Rabbeinu Bachya from the Middle Ages, he says, aha, this is the same animal and the same person. But first, you thought of them as your enemy. And now, after you've lifted them up once, after you've helped them out when they were in a crunch, after you've been there for somebody, you look at them and they look at you differently, and you're now their friend. And that my prayer for all of us this Shavuot and through this pandemic is that all those people that we see as enemies, as strangers, as somehow apart from us, that we're able to open ourselves to be sources of love and uplift, that we're able to strengthen one another, that we're able to become friends. Chag Sameach.
The Kotzker Rebbe famously said, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. In some cases, our brokenness is easily apparent, but often it's hidden, and we walk through the world wounded and hurting. And we are seeing that all the more so in these days as we all make our way through this global pandemic and the losses we have each experienced. On our festival of Shavuot, we celebrate the giving and receiving of Torah and the commandments. And interestingly, we know that there were actually 2 sets of tablets in the possession of the Israelites. The first tablets that Moses carried down the mountain and shattered when he saw the Israelites worshiping the golden calf. and the second set that was then created in partnership between God and Moses. And while we know that that second full set of tablets was housed in the ark that the Israelites carried with them through the wilderness, the Midrash asks what happened to the shattered first pieces of the first set. And the answer was the broken pieces were picked up and placed in the ark right next to the second set of tablets, the whole and the broken existing side by side throughout the journey. There was holiness in brokenness. Those shattered pieces were collected, protected, and sheltered in sacred space. At Makor Shalom, we will be sharing more study and prayer together on the theme of finding wholeness and holiness in the brokenness of the tablets in our lives during our Erev Shavuot program and service Thursday night at 7 p.m. on Zoom, as we look forward to celebrating our festival of Shavuot together.
Shalom. I hope this video finds you and your families safe and healthy during these difficult times. In honor of the holiday of Shavuot, I'd like to share with all of you one of my favorite teachings about the Torah, a teaching that has its basis in the Torah itself, specifically chapter 30 of the book of Deuteronomy, in which Moses is presenting his farewell speech to the children of Israel, and he says, Lo bashamayim hi, the Torah is not in heaven, nor is it to be found across the sea, but rather it is close by. It is in your mouths and in your hearts. Based on these verses from Deuteronomy, the Talmud presents a beautiful story. A story about Rabbi Eliezer and his colleagues who, as rabbis are wont to do, are debating. In this case, they are debating the purity of a particular oven. And Rabbi Eliezer does everything he can possibly think of, offers every explanation he knows for why he believes that the oven is pure. But the other rabbis do not agree. So then Rabbi Eliezer says, if the halakha is according to me, if I am in fact right, then may this carob tree prove it. At which time, the story goes, the carob tree uproots itself and flies hundreds of feet into the air. But again, they do not listen. And Rabbi Eliezer continues, then if the halakha is according to me, let this stream prove me right. And at that moment, we learn that the water in the stream starts to flow backwards. The story continues with the rabbis not accepting any of Rabbi Eliezer's proofs, until finally he says, if I am in fact correct, then let the heavens confirm. At which time, the Talmud says, a bat kol, a heavenly voice cries out and says, why are you giving Rabbi Eliezer such a hard time? Why don't you listen to him and trust his answer? At which point, Rabbi Yehoshua stands up and says, Lo bashamayim hi, the Torah is not in heaven. I think it's a particularly important story for all of us as we think about the role the Torah plays in our lives. On Shavuot, we think of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. We imagine ourselves standing together at that moment of revelation. But it's also an opportunity to think of the Torah that lives within our hearts and upon our lips. How can we embody the Torah, its values, its morals, its teachings, its mitzvot, in the actions of our everyday lives? Certainly as we look out into our world and see a world that has been turned upside down, with so many suffering and afraid, we can also see all the holiness, the blessings that surround us, the essential workers, the people who put their lives on the lines every day, who embody the values of our Torah in order to help, in order to step forward, in order to save lives. It's also something that we can do as well, to think of those ways in which we can help, in which we can step forward, in which we can say, Lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not something that's far away, but it's something that lives within us and that we can share with the world. Wishing everyone a Chag Shavuot Sameach. Happy Shavuot. May we spend this sacred time sharing our Torah with one another, with our community, and with our world.
Hi, it's Rabbi Benjamin David of Adath Emanu-El. Shavuot has us celebrate the Jewish people receiving the Torah. But this only happens after 40 long days and 40 long nights of waiting. It required a lot of patience on the part of the Israelites. And the theme of patience is certainly something we can all relate to these days. We are waiting. To quote David Byrne of the Talking Heads, we are still waiting. Waiting for life to return to normal, waiting perhaps for school to return to normal, waiting for summer. We're waiting all the time. And patience is really hard. It's hard for kids, it's hard for teens, and it's hard for us adults too. But I think this quarantine has helped us to be patient with ourselves, and patient with other people. I would also like to believe that this time of quarantine has filled us all with hope, that in our waiting is a level of hopefulness as well. We're not just waiting, we're waiting for a better time. We're anticipating a time of greater community, when we emerge from this quarantine with a greater sense of togetherness, a greater sense of faith, a greater sense of belief. And just like the waiting that our Israelite ancestors did so long ago, I choose to believe that this waiting will lead us to a place of good, to a better tomorrow. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everyone. Happy Shavuot, the season of the giving of the Torah. And revelation is such a key part of Jewish tradition. The mystics of Sfat in the 16th century created this custom of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, of staying up all night long and studying, because not only was it enriching to their souls, but it's also what they called tikkun, repair, for what the Israelites did the night before Revelation and the day of. They were supposed to get up bright and early and get ready to receive the Torah, and instead they slept in. How many of us during this quarantine are sleeping in these days a little longer than we should? So they developed this tikkun, this repair, so that they would wake up early in the morning, the next morning, and be ready for Sinai, ready for Revelation. Once again, the reenactment of Revelation. But there's something that's even more powerful than that. And Shai Agnon, the amazing Israeli author, wrote the following in his book, which is entitled The Sign, from his book, A City in Its Fullness. And he writes, "Now, children, listen to me. I'll tell you something of my youth. Now your father is old, and if he let his beard grow as did Abraham, you'd see white hair in his beard. But I too was once a little boy who used to do things little children do. But while the old men sat in the house of study preparing themselves for the time of the giving of the Torah, the following morning my friends and I would stand outside looking upward, hoping to catch the moment when the sky splits open and everything you ask for, even supernatural things, is immediately given to you by God. If you're worthy and if you catch the right moment. In that case, why do I feel as though none of my wishes has ever been granted? Because I had so many things to ask for that before I decided what to wish first, sleep came upon me and I dozed off. When a man is young, his wishes are many. Before he gets around to asking for anything, he is overcome by sleep. When a man is old, he has no desires if he asks for anything. He asks for a little sleep. So the custom is that on Shavuot evening, there is a moment where you can look up into the sky. And as tradition teaches, God will answer any prayer that we have. Even if you can't stay up all night, take a moment and pray to God and ask whatever that one wish is. What would that one wish be? Chag Sameach.
Hi and happy Shavuot. My name is Rabbi Rachel Schoenfeld, and I am here with my daughter Faye and my daughter Nora, straight from our house in Collingswood. I am the rabbi of Congregation B'nai Tikvah Beth Israel in Washington Township. And apart from being a rabbi, I am also a soferet. What that means is that I am trained to write sacred Jewish texts. There are not that many women soferets in the world. It's a traditionally male occupation, but during the past 15 years, the field of women soferets has blossomed, and now you can find out about an organization for women soferets and to support our work at stamscribes.org. There's about 50 of us worldwide who do this work and support each other in our learning and doing and in this art form. Today I would like to show you some of the practical tools that sofers and soferets use in our work. One of the things to know is that most of the objects that we use in our work are from natural sources, and there's a tradition as well to use gold needles as we sew Torahs. I am now going to write an aleph for you, and I'm going to invite Happy Shavuot.
Chag Sameach, happy Shavuot from Rabbi Cynthia Kravitz and the Temple Har Zion community of Mount Holly, New Jersey. We wish all of you, all of us, a good and healthy Shavuot, a beautiful, beautiful holiday it is, the marriage of freedom, the freedom at Pesach with responsibility, with the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And freedom with responsibility is that message of our Torah. So enjoy Shavuot, it's a time of revelation, and it's a time of some good cheesecake. So Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Happy Shavuot. I'm Rabbi Louis Aaron, the Rabbi Emeritus of Lionsgate Continuing Care Retirement Community in Voorhees, New Jersey. And I'd like to tell you a story about why Mount Sinai was chosen as the place of Matan Torah, the place of the revelation of the Torah. So the rabbis of old, the rabbis of the Talmud, had a problem, a very big problem. In fact, it's a problem that we still have today. The problem is, how does one, that is you or me or anyone, understand the story of God's choosing the Jewish people and giving us Jews the Torah on Mount Sinai without becoming haughty, proud, and arrogant? Our ancient teachers liked to answer questions like this one with stories. In fact, they loved stories. They loved retelling the story of the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And they enjoyed elaborating on all the wonderful and miraculous ways God cared for the Jewish people in the desert. But they were worried that the Jews might misunderstand all that God has done for us and become haughty. And although the rabbis of old were proud to be Jewish and loved Torah, they did not want us to become arrogant and forget the Torah's true purpose. So they told a story. When the mountains of old heard that the Holy One planned to bring God's glorious presence, the Shekhinah, down upon a certain mountain, and through the Shekhinah give the Torah to the Jewish people, all the mountains were excited. The mountains knew all about the Torah. Torah was the plan of creation, the way of all wisdom. And now that Torah was to enter the world, they all wanted to be the spot where Torah was to be given to our Israelite ancestors. You can imagine the commotion as the mountains tried to decide which one of them would be the special place where the Torah was to be given. Finally, after a long and loud debate, the mountains decided that the mountain to be chosen would have to be in the land of Israel, for that's where our Israelite ancestors were going. You can be sure that mountains like the Alps and the Rockies were disappointed because they were too far away. But what could they do? Mountains cannot move very far. But which mountain in the land of Israel would it be? So after lots more talk, the mountains nominated 3 mountains in the land of Israel. They were tall Mount Tabor, snow-capped Mount Hermon, and elegant Mount Carmel. But before they were to vote, Mount Everest, the chair mountain, decided that each of the nominees should make a speech. Mount Tabor spoke first. Mount Tabor reached and stretched almost all the way to heaven, looking as tall and as important as a mountain could be. And with a haughty voice, Mount Tabor said, I, of all the mountains that inhabit this holy and revered land, am the most fit and acceptable to be the place where the Shekhinah will alight, so that the long wandering people of Israel can receive the sacred and glorious Torah at my feet. As you can tell, Mount Tabor was long-winded even for a mountain, and Mount Tabor continued. And the holy and blessed Shekhinah can then rest in perfect purity on my high and lofty peak, for it is clean and pure. Even in far-off days, in the days of Noah's flood, when waters covered the earth, my head looked over all. The floods merely splashed upon my broad shoulders. So vote for me, the lofty mountain fit for the Torah. Most of the other mountains politely clapped, but there were a few shouts of approval from Mount Tabor supporters. Tabor for Torah, Tabor for Torah, they all yelled out. Mount Everest banged some cliffs together, and the mountains were silent. Then Mount Hermon came forward. Mount Hermon stood like a wise old sage and spoke of the long experience with the people of Israel he had. Yes, oh yes, he said, I remember so clearly how Abraham camped on my slopes on the way to Canaan, and how Jacob played with his children in my snows on their way home from Haran. Israel and I go back a long, long time, my friends, but let me tell you how I just recently saved the children of Israel at the Red Sea when they were fleeing from Pharaoh's chariots. Well, there I was minding my own business wondering when the Israelites would return from Egypt. It had been almost 400 years since I saw them last. Standing there and pondering, I received an urgent call from the Most High. Hermon, Hermon, the Holy One called out, I need your help. Any time, God, I said, for I always like to help, just ask my friends. Hermon, I need your help to hold back the waters of the Red Sea so the Jews can cross it in safety. Well, as soon as God asked, I put on my swimsuit and dove into the Red Sea, holding back its flowing waters so the children of Israel could cross it without getting wet. When they crossed, God told me to get out of the water, so I jumped back home. And as soon as I left, the waters flooded over the entire army of Pharaoh. Can you believe it? Mount Hermon became so excited that he started to sing, O mountains, why do you leap like rams? O Lebanon and Sirion, like little rams. It was beginning to be tiring. Mount Hermon liked to talk about himself, but Hermon continued. So I, who saved the Jews of the Red Sea, and who was their friend for so many years, I am the best place for them to receive Torah. Again, most of the mountains clapped politely, but Mount Hermon's followers paraded around shouting, Hermon and heritage, Hermon and heritage. Again, Mount Everest brought the mountains to order. Finally, the third mountain, Mount Carmel, spoke. She said quietly, I am the best of all, for I live on land and sea. My head is in the air, my feet rest deep in the earth. I touch all of creation so that wherever the Shekhinah cares to be, I can be there to receive the Torah. Again, polite applause, and again a noisy demonstration as Mount Carmel's friends called out, on sea, on land, in the earth and in the air, Carmel and Torah will both be there. Soon all the mountains were chaotically debating, shouting and cheering. With great difficulty, Mount Everest was able to restore order. The mountains and the hills finally quieted down and prepared to vote. And then God, looking down from God's majestic high throne, laughed at all the mountains. Who are they to tell God on which mountain the Torah should be given? So the Holy One looked over the entire world. in the middle of a wilderness, in the Sinai Peninsula, between Egypt and the land of Israel, God found a little, humble, quiet mountain that had not been speaking, just minding his own business, being a mountain. Impressed by this mountain's humility, God picked the little mountain and said, I will not give the Torah to Israel on the noisy, boastful, proudful mountains of the land of Israel, but here on this modest little mountain will my Shekhinah rest, and the Jewish people receive the Torah. The little mountain, which we call Mount Sinai, did not know what to say, but it didn't matter. For Mount Sinai did not have a chance to say everything. As soon as God had spoken, the Israelites were already at Mount Sinai's feet. The Shekhinah, God's glorious presence, was hovering above, and you know the rest of the story. Well, the other mountains were not forgotten, but Little Sinai, although Little Sinai never grew any taller, reached heights far beyond all the other mountains, because Mount Sinai's head was filled with high values and lofty teachings. Mount Sinai was filled with the spirit of Torah. Since Mount Sinai was humble and modest, and not puffed himself up like Mount Tabor or Mount Hermon or Mount Carmel, little Mount Sinai was able to reach a truly high place. And so it is with the Jews, the rabbis of old taught. If we walk around arrogantly and puffed up because we have Torah, then the Torah does us little good. Like the mountains, we will be so full of ourselves that we could not possibly have any room to accept Torah. If, on the other hand, if we are modest and humble and true to ourselves, just like Mount Sinai, then our Torah, our tradition, can bring us to a very special place. So let us open our hearts and minds to make room for Torah as we celebrate Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, Zaman Matan Toratenu, the season in which our ancestors received the gift of Torah. Chag Sameach.